Hello everyone, this is Jonathan Little for PokerNews.com. Today we have another hand from the $5,000 buy-in six-handed World Series of Poker event. Here I open up with Queen Jack of Clubs from the hijack seat out of my 100,000 effective stack. Folds around to Jack Salter from the previous video, very good loose aggressive player, who calls in the big blind out of his 50 big blind stack. He's lost some chips somehow between now and the previous hand that I reviewed for PokerNews.com. So who knows where they went. Flop comes Jack 7-2, one club. I mean, this is about as good of a flop as I could ask for. We have top pair, backdoor flush draw, an overcard. Basically, we have it all. And if he decides to play for lots of money here, I'm certainly not folding. So when I bet this flop for 5,500 into the 13,000 pot, if he raises, I'm just going to call and be in call down mode. And again, I mentioned in the previous video that with a hand like ace king, I'm just putting in 60 big blinds pre-flop. Here with top pair, good kicker, backdoor draws, we're putting in 50 big blinds. It just is what it is. One thing worth mentioning here is I did bet somewhat small. This is a very dry board. Whenever the board comes like one big card, one middle card, one low card, or one big card and two little cards, very often as the pre-flop raiser, you can justify betting relatively small because you should have a decent range advantage. When you have a range advantage, like if you just plugged my range against my opponent's range into a program like Equilab, you will see that I'm probably going to win in this spot maybe 55 or 58% of the time. And whenever you have an advantage like that, you can just bet small and there's not a whole lot your opponent can do about it. You can bet small and you can bet frequently. And that's what I'm going to be doing here. Just so happens I have one of the best hands I can have. So he does check call, which is fine. That's great, actually. I mean, I expect him to check call a pretty good amount of the time. On the turn, when it brings us 7, you always want to ask yourself now, what is my opponent's flop check calling range? Well, it's going to be a lot of hands like jacks and 7s, and maybe gut shot straight draws. So the jacks are never going to fold, but also I'm not really loving playing a big pot if he has ace jack or king jack or, queen jack or jack 10 or 10-9. I mean, those are the reasonable jacks, and we're essentially chopping there because we lose to the good ones, we beat the weaker ones. So, we're basically chopping equity there. Maybe we're slightly ahead. And then, if he has a 7, clearly we're dead. And if he has a hand like 10-9 or 10-8 or 8-9-8, well, he's drawing to 4 outs, and he can just have his 4-out draw because he's going to bluff with those hands a lot of the time because they have no showdown value, so that's great. If he has overcards like king-queen, I mean, he has 3 outs again. That's fine. He can have his 3 outs. He's going to bluff a lot of the time. If he has ace-x, he's probably going to fold if I bet. But again, he has 3 outs, right? So this is a spot where I really don't care about protection at all because if I do get outdrawn, I'm usually going to lose one bet. Whereas when I don't get outdrawn and he has garbage, he's very often going to bluff the river. And when he has a marginal mate hand that is worse than my hand, like let's say he has pocket 8s or pocket 6s, he's probably going to call a river bet from me. So I'm getting the same amount out of those hands because unless he has exactly jack 10 or jack 9 or jack 8, he's probably only going to put in one more bet with all of his marginal made stuff. So I like this check behind. This is a spot where you will see some players lead small in Salter's shoes and then bet huge on the river. And that really will put you in a tough spot because the logic is that I'm not going to be betting my middle pairs on the flop. So that means I don't have very many middle pairs because I would check behind with some of them. But my opponent could have all the middle pairs, right? Because he's going to be calling with way more 7s in his range than I am raising before the flop because I'm not raising 8-7 offsuit, whereas he could be defending 8-7 offsuit. So he has way more 7s. So if he leads small on the turn with his 7s and then all of his draws, like the gut shots and maybe king, queen and whatnot, and then he blasts the river with some portion of those, presumably in a somewhat balanced manner, well, that puts me in a nasty spot. I'm not going to fold my hand, but imagine I had a weaker hand like ace 10 or pocket 3s. With those hands, I would be in a miserable spot, and that's going to be the case a lot of the time. So I don't really mind a lead in this scenario from him. And when the turn pairs, that's often going to be a decent spot to do that. River's a 3, which is great. He checks. I'm going to value bet now. I'm going to go very small. If you just ran my flop betting range and turn checking range against his range, I'm going to have a pretty good advantage, I imagine, especially if I have top pairs in my range like I do. So I'm going to bet small. And I expect to get called here by a lot of the marginal made hands. Maybe he hero calls with ace queen or ace jack if he doesn't, or ace 10 if he doesn't 3-bet those before the flop. And I think this is good. This is a scenario where I probably am not bluffing too often. if I am bluffing here a lot, I definitely need to use a bigger bet. But I think I'm just betting a lot of my gut shots on the turn. Like if I have the 9-8, I'm just betting it on the turn. So I really should not have very many bluffs. I should have a lot of thin value bets here, but relatively few bluffs. So because of that, I need to bet small with my whole range, including whatever bluffs I do have. So I bet 8,000. I like this. And now he check raises to 10,000 on top. What in the world does this mean? Well, maybe he's using the same logic that I just gave out. If he's very rarely bluffing here, then he should be check raising small, right? Because notice, it's 10,000 more into a pot that's going to go up to about 60,000. So a huge, huge pot. He's giving me fantastic pot odds to call. I need to be right. I don't know what it is. Maybe 1 in 6 times here to justify calling. So am I good with my top pair good kicker 1 in 6 times? I mean, I don't know how I can't be against this opponent. Again, this goes back to what I was saying in the previous video on Poker News about how when you know your opponent's very aggressive, he should really shy away from running too many bluffs like this. That said, some people, I mean, you get the reputation for being very aggressive by being very aggressive. And knowing that he's very aggressive, I don't see how I can ever fold this or any hand, really. I mean, if I'm sitting here and I decided to value bet the river with pocket 8s, I'm still just calling. What if, I mean, I'm not betting ace king on the river. If I had pocket 6s, I mean, all these hands are the same. They're all crappy made hands that can't beat anything. But he's giving me great pot odds. A lot of people look at this and say there's no way the guy is not bluffing because he's giving you such good pot odds, you quote unquote have to call. But you have to realize good players, like Jack Salter, are capable of using the same bet size with their strong made hands and their bluffs. Don't think that they are playing in a somewhat mindless manner where they're using big raises with their bluffs and small raises with their garbage. Because if they do that, then they're not a good player anymore. They're straightforward and obvious. And that's the exact opposite of a good player. So anyway, I have to call here, and I think I'm calling a ton. I mean, the only time I'm folding to this raise is when I just have total garbage. Like if I happen to have 5-4 or something like that, I'll fold that. Maybe I need to have some bluff raises in here. If I wanted to bluff raise, what would I like to bluff raise with? If I wanted to click it back to, I don't even know. If I make it 30,000, what do I want to be raising with? I don't even know. I don't have much of a re-raise range here. If I have a 7, what am I doing? I guess I'm just calling with a 7, mainly because it's so easy for him to have some slow-played boat. So I guess I'm calling with a lot of hands. So I'm really not re-raising very often at all. So I guess I don't need to worry about that too much. Obviously, if I have a full house, I'm raising. So if I have those hands, which bluff should I have? I don't think it really matters too much. I guess I want to do it with a 2 or a 3 in my hand to block his full houses. And given I don't have very many 2s or 3s, I guess that'll work out nicely. All right, so anyway, let's call. What are we against? He has ace 4 of clubs for a bluff. Interesting bluff. I think this is a reasonable bluffing hand because notice he doesn't beat any of my value betting range, right? So, yeah. If he wants to bluff, going back to the same story, which hand should he be bluffing with? Well, he can probably call with any pair, so he needs to find hands that are not paired. He wants to block my better made hands that would be betting thin. Is that right? Well, it's kind of an interesting spot because he wants me to be value betting so thinly that I will fold to a raise. Because if I have it, well, I just told you, if I have it in like pocket 4s, I'm not folding, right? So what is he even trying to get me to fold here? I mean, maybe he thinks I'm going to fold way more often than I am. I mean, I just told you all I'm calling with any pair. So I guess in theory, he wants me to have an unpaired hand. So he wants to make sure he does. I mean, the thing is, though, he beats 9-8, right? He beats all those gut shots. So yeah, this is a weird spot. I'm kind of surprised to see such a small check raise with this hand, but I guess it makes some sense. Anyway, that's going to be it for this video for Poker News. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think, and be sure to check back next week for another fun poker hand. Thanks for watching.